dirt road in a gooseneck, saddle up with me. Dry land in God's country, crops far as I can see. The headlights on both ends of my day. This country life is for me. Ride with us, HPJ. Ride with us, HPJ.
Well, hey there, folks. Good afternoon and welcome back to our noon session of High Plains Journal's virtual Cattle U. My name is Jennifer Latsky. I'm the Associate Editor for High Plains Journal, and it's my pleasure to welcome joining us today Danette Amstein of Midan Marketing and Brian Bertelson of US Premium Beef. You know, for 70 years, High Plains Journal has been a weekly fixture in your mailboxes, as well as here in the Queen of the Cow Towns, Dodge City, Kansas. Kansas has a unique role in the history of raising beef. Brave cowboys took on trails to move cattle from Texas to the railheads here in Dodge, in Abilene, in Ellsworth, and more. They took advantage of the market opportunities that they found here for their cattle. Now, some of those fellows, they stayed and they put down roots. They built packing plants and feed yards, ranches, and more. And today, Kansas is a world leader in producing the quality beef that graces so many plates around the globe. So when we here at High Plains Journal thought about where we would host our Cattle U, well, we had one answer only: Dodge City. Well, now, the global pandemic may have changed our plans a little bit this year, but the mission to give you the information to be better at your mission of feeding the world, well, that's the same whether you're joining us in person or from your easy chair. Now, don't you worry. Next year, we have every intention of being back in person for 2021 for our Cattle U in Dodge City. And we hope that you join us then. But in the meantime, we all here at High Plains Journal want to extend our deepest thanks for our very gracious and flexible speakers and our sponsors who have pivoted to this virtual platform. Alrighty, so now for some housekeeping. I'm sure many of you have had experiences with the Zoom webinar in the past few months. But for those of you who may be unfamiliar with how this is going to work, let me share some notes. First, we've already muted your video and your microphones, and we ask that you make sure that those are muted throughout the presentations. If you have any questions, and honestly, that's what we're all here for, we ask that you click on the chat box below and type your questions in the pop-up box that appears to the side of your screen. We've built in plenty of time to answer your questions, so please feel free to ask away. All of our sessions are going to be recorded, and the recordings will be posted soon after we're done at cattleu.net. The schedule of speakers and sessions is posted there as well. Remember, if you missed a session live, you can always catch up with the recordings later on at your convenience. Now, we want to thank our lead sponsor for this session this afternoon, Kansas Beef Council.
Good afternoon. My name is John Hoxie, Director of Industry Relations for the Kansas Beef Council. We have the honor and the privilege this afternoon to partner with the High Plains Journal in their virtual 2020 Cattle U event. Also very proud to be sponsoring this afternoon's session that features Danette Amstein. Danette is a managing principal at Midan Marketing based out of Mooresville, North Carolina, where she helps the organization achieve their mission and their vision of providing business solutions for meat industry clients across the country. And in that role, Danette is able to work with clients in a myriad of different ways, but specifically offering them business communications and marketing that will not only help them achieve their goals, but help them be successful as well. Her passion for the meat industry really started on her family's farming operation in Jetmore, Kansas. Danette, after high school, attended Kansas State University, obtained her bachelor's degree in animal science and industry. After college, had the opportunity to work pretty closely with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and really state beef councils, state beef organizations across the country. That passion for the meat industry continues today as she works with her clients across the country. And Danette loves the color purple, is a very avid Wildcats fan. Married to Todd, she is a mother of 2, has a boy and a girl, loves chocolate, is able to come home annually for the family's wheat harvest. Danette, as you'll find out this afternoon, she is a very good speaker, highly sought after, a content contributor, and contributes as well to meat industry publications across the country. Again, want to thank the High Plains Journal for putting this event on. We think this event is going to add value to your bottom line, increase your knowledge, and really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to come and learn and enjoy Danette's presentations. She's going to be talking about the ever-shifting consumer beef purchasing trends. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all of our great sponsors like the Kansas Beef Council for helping us put on this virtual Cattle U. Just a reminder, you'll be able to find out more information about them, the services and products that they offer in those registration packet materials that were emailed to you earlier this week. You can always also find more information online at cattleu.net. All righty. Well, now, after that wonderful introduction, it's time to bring onto the screen our first speaker for this session, Danette Amstein. Danette, the screen is yours, madam.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, John, for that amazing introduction. That was very, very kind. It is a pleasure to be with you guys this afternoon. I, like everyone else, wish this would have happened in July in person. Would have absolutely loved to have been back home and share this information with you. But we're going to do it, it's not the old-fashioned way. It's the way I've been doing everything for the last 21 weeks, and that's through the screen here. So I'm going to switch over here to my presentation and look forward to answering your questions. Okay, so let's get started. Today I'm going to talk about consumer beef purchasing trends. Really, this was going to be titled Post-COVID-19 because as Jenny and the group at High Plains Journal, when we were talking, we thought COVID was going to be a much shorter blip on our radars than it's turned out to be. So what I'm going to share with you today is really more of an effort of what it looked like before and what it's looking like now, and how we see some of those trends accelerating to where we believe we're going to be afterwards. But before I jump in, a little bit more about Midan. We are a full service marketing agency. What makes us different from most marketing companies is that we focus solely in the meat industry. All of our clients are in full channel from farm to fork. And so that's where our focus is. My focus today is really going to be talking about the US shopper, the US consumer that eats our product, and how we can best market to them at a time where life has been changing pretty significantly for them. So we're going to look at the consumer base here in the US, and I'll provide you with a list of expectations that they have had, and those have really accelerated during COVID. I think it's important to talk about how disruptive this has been. I know for each of you, there's still cattle to be fed, there's monks to be scooped, there's cattle to be worked, there's things to be done every day, and COVID may not have felt like the big disruption that it has in other parts of the country. As I mentioned, we are just now reopening our office to a much smaller group of people. Not everyone can come back yet, 21 weeks after we left in early March. And for many of our parents, they can't come in either because they're also being teachers for their students. So it has been quite a disruptive round of issues that consumers are having to deal with, and we're going to talk about that from a variety of angles. I would like to start with a simple question, a question I like to ask pretty much anyone in the beef industry when I talk to them, and that's why? Why are you in the beef business? Why do you get up every morning and do what you do? I really love the answers that I hear. Most often they are about, well, I like being independent. I like raising my animals. I like being outdoors. I like seeing baby calves turn into full-size animals. Probably the most common answer I hear has something to do with a picture like this in most of our minds, right? It's about handing down the farm or the ranch to the next generation. This cute little guy is a friend of mine's nephew, and he is, he's the reason. You teach him to raise bottle the baby calves, they bottle feed them, and then pretty soon they're showing cattle, and then pretty soon they're helping you work them, and you go on up from there. And we take pride in that and handing the farm down from multiple generations, as has happened in our own operation. The odd thing when I ask the question of why you're in the beef business is I rarely hear an answer that has to do with these folks, consumers. The fact that we're raising quality, wholesome beef to feed consumers here and around the world, it really doesn't typically enter the conversation until I pose the question. This really was driven home to me a long time ago. When between my junior and senior year at K-State, I had the opportunity to intern in Washington, D.C. And I stayed in a dorm that had been open for interns that summer. And my roommate was from Oakland, California. So she certainly had never been on a farm and never thought much about how food was raised. Hadn't given it a lot of consideration. But on one Saturday morning, the phone rang early, and I thought I'd just throw in a picture of a phone since none of them look like this anymore. You know, the ones with the long cords on the wall, and you got to reach for them and answer them. And it was my dad. And he said, well, we got a pen of cattle ready to go. And my brother and I had some cattle in that pen. And he was like, what do you think? Should we take it? Should we wait? And this would have been late May. And so we had the conversation about the seasonality. We talked about the weather. We talked about upcoming wheat harvest. What should we do? Honestly, I don't remember what we did. I don't remember what decision we made as we were thinking about cattle and how we needed to move them for our own purposes. Thought I'd include a picture of some homegrown calves here on the farm. This was taken on in our home feed lot this summer when I was home in July. Because really what we're about is raising these, right? Making a difference and sending them on to the next phase of the process. But as I finished that conversation, my roommate, who happened to have a sleep mask on, she's from Oakland, her dad was very involved in Ghirardelli chocolates in some kind of leadership position. And she popped that sleep mask up so I could see her eyes, and she leaned forward and she said, "So you're one of those people." Well, I didn't know what one of those people was, but it turns out for her, one of those people was a person that raised meat or raised animals for meat. So I said, yeah, I happily am one of those people. I'm one of those people that raises meat, raises cattle, so that consumers can put beef on their plates. And so that really solidified for me the need to share our message with consumers on a basis that they can understand it. At that point in time, she was a vegan, or called herself a vegan, and I'll talk more about that later. So when we get started today, I just wanted to share the information that kind of fuels me, the experience that fueled me in the role that I'm in, and what I work to do every day. We're going to start with the marketplace. So the meat industry, as Jenny mentioned when we started, the team had to pivot, and pivot is probably going to be our word for 2020 because there's been so many changes that have had to take place. I don't expect consumers to go back to what normal was before, say, in January, February of this year. It is indeed going to be a new normal because our world has changed that much. But before we get into what we're calling those expectations or those macro trends, we just want to set up what kind of the current state of the marketplace looks like and some of the changes we're seeing because of COVID. Consumers have a lot on their mind, and we see this in a couple of areas, both health and well-being because of COVID and not wanting to be sick, but also the economic downturn that's impacting the country and the social injustices, social justice movement that is taking place right now. So all this is swirling around folks as they're trying to make decisions every day, and consumers are being asked to balance those concerns with everything that's going on. So we have an intersection right now, particularly when we talk about the beef industry, where there's two conflicting trends that are coming head on at each other. One is the economic downturn. So historically, when we have an economic downturn, consumers become extremely price sensitive. It becomes about the cheapest cuts and a lot of ground beef, and that's what they want to buy. And we know that many consumers have really experienced a decrease in their income since March. In fact, 25% are still experiencing decreases in their households due to COVID-related incidences. Only 7% of folks have seen their income go up. Those are probably the ones selling masks and hand sanitizer. So if we look at what's happening economically, we've got a situation where income is suppressed and consumers are looking at price. But we have to weigh that with what's happening on the health side. So right now, because everyone wants to stay well, they're paying more attention to what they eat. They're paying more attention to the quality of the food that they eat. And we're seeing very much a willingness to pay for health claims and attributes. So we have both ends of the spectrum coming together and colliding in a very unique intersection as we watch what consumers are thinking and doing with meat. If we look at what's happened since COVID started, so since March, we've been tracking both beef, pork, and poultry purchases and their cooking habits, so what consumers have done. So I want to share just a few of these with you. Some of these may be a surprise to you just because of the way, particularly us in the Midwest, grew up. It's not a big surprise that most of us eat most of our meals at home. But 51% of shoppers are preparing 90 to 100% of their meals at home, and that is unusual, particularly in suburban and metro areas, to be eating at home that much. Certainly as the food service industry was completely decimated, a lot of places still not open for dine-in. Takeout has taken off and is doing well in some pockets of the country right now, but more and more meals being eaten at home. Probably a more surprising statistic for some of you would be that just over half of consumers are now buying and freezing meat more than normal. You know, we've met consumers that have never frozen meat, and it's not a big deal to us to go to the freezer and pick out some steaks or some grinds from when we had an animal process. But for most consumers, that's a unique thing. They plan for what they're going to eat right then for that week. That's all they plan for, and then that's what they buy. 61% of consumers are trying new ways. So they're experimenting with Instapots and with air fryers and with all sorts of ways to keep what they're eating exciting for them, as they are spending more time at home and cooking more meals at home. And that leads to where we're seeing the variety. 45% are purchasing a wider variety of meat cuts. Now, at first, that was simply because they had to purchase what they could find. When we saw shelves empty, right? When we saw people kind of panic and a lot of meat purchased, they were picking up what they could. But now what we're seeing is that they're doing that for the adventure of it, for experiencing the wider variety of things that they can try. We also have a few other trends I just want to mention here. One of them is 55% of consumers are more interested in buying food from their local farmer at the farm. So they're more interested in how they can get food that's very, very close to them in proximity. And 59% of consumers are shopping more health consciously. And we really see that because that's about that intersection of keeping ourselves healthy right now during the pandemic. So all of this eating of meat has really led to growth in both meat and poultry sales. And so the first line I'm showing you here is what beef has done since the 1st of March. We saw this certainly the spike before the end of March, and then we start seeing kind of leveling out at a higher level than it was before. There was some news that came out yesterday of the demand for beef is really strong. The demand for chicken isn't as strong. And so beef's winning in that area, and we see that happening. We're expecting more features this fall from supermarkets as supply gets steadier, and that will be a good thing for us. Just to show you what beef looks like in comparison to the other meats, here's the rest of them. So the yellow line is chicken, the pink line is pork, the purple line is turkey, the blue line that kind of juts up there and juts back down, that's lamb, that's around Easter time, and then the black line shows you what total meat is doing during this time. So all told, about 24% meat department dollar sales increase during this time frame. A lot of meat sold and continues to be sold in grocery stores around this country. Not so much, we're seeing sales start to pick back up in food service, but certainly not at the level that it was at, and thankful that the grocery stores are helping us absorb and move meat through the channels. I'm going to change gears here and just talk a minute about the consumers and give you a basis of understanding of kind of what the consumers are looking like. I'm going to paint a very broad picture as we start to kind of attempt to understand these fickle people, the consumers, right? They change their mind often on what they want, and our future is dependent on their purchase. So we really have to pay attention to those trends. The U.S. consumers, the consumer base is absolutely more diverse and more complex than it's ever been. That seems to be happening with each new generation. And so as we work to understand their needs in order to help make sure that meat stays relevant, that beef is an important part of their meal purchases when they're shopping for it, and certainly when they're eating it. Had the opportunity to add some videos here. I want to introduce you to 3 different consumers just to give you a flavor of what they're saying during the pandemic. And the first one I'm going to introduce you to is Leslie.
My name is Leslie, and I live with my husband and 12-year-old daughter in the Chicago suburbs. We probably eat meat once or twice a week, definitely more than we used to since COVID. We're home a lot more, not eating out nearly as much as we used to. We're also trying a lot of new recipes, really, because there's way more time on our hands than we ever had before, and also just to keep things interesting since we're home so much. I think it would be really helpful online if you could actually see the differences for all the different cuts and choices of meat listed, so you knew how they differed from each other. It would also be helpful if they said what those meats were good for, especially when something's not available, to help you figure out what a good replacement would be. Typically, if I can't find it, I have to go online to see what else would work and just kind of hope for the best.
So like Leslie, Leslie actually helps me introduce the Gen Xers on this chart. One of the chances to show you how there's so many ideas and expectations that each generation brings. And I thought this would be a fun way to do that as we see the span of generations from our silent generation through the newest generation being born now, the Gen Alpha. So there's just some fun markers on here. If we talk about the Gen X of Leslie, I'm a Gen Xer, grew up with the Rubik's Cube and the Walkman. Certainly enjoy having the chance to have a little moment here going back through memory lane of all the things that are involved in each different generation. The US population right now is about 330 million. And so each generation has a different set of reasons for why they purchase what they purchase. Gen Z is the up and coming generation that we're starting to focus on what their needs are. Now, if you look at the last 2 rows, we have NA for them in dollar share for meat and poultry and meat and poultry growth potential, because right now, they're eating from by mom and dad's choice or on a college campus if they were so lucky to go. And they aren't making a lot of their own meat decisions. But if you back up and look at the millennial generation, you can see that they are 23% of dollar share right now, but 54% of our growth. So I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about millennials and Gen Zs as we look forward over the next 5 years, because they're going to have a significant impact on where we're at. I don't want to leave out the boomers. They're 35% of dollar share now, so they're very important to us, as are the Gen Xers. But you can see that their growth rate for them isn't as strong, particularly for the boomers. So we have to pay some attention to them now. They've got the dollars and they like to eat meat, and they were very thankful for that. But we also know that we've got to put more emphasis moving towards this end of the generational chart. It's also important for us to think about how we become more racially and ethnically diverse. If you look at the early boomers and the Gen X, there's certainly more Caucasian than as you move all the way over to Gen Zs, where we're seeing more Hispanics and Blacks also making up our population breakout. The millennials are where I'm going to spend focus right now because of the buying power that they have and the decisions that they're making. So the millennials are out of college. They're into those first jobs. The younger millennials are having children. The older millennials have the children. So that also impacts how they make decisions. So it's important for us to think about how they purchase food and what decisions they are making right now as they move forward. So let me introduce you to a millennial and have him talk about what he's thinking about when he's making purchases. Let me introduce you to Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina with my wife and 2 daughters. We tend to do things the old-fashioned way and go to the grocery store, but because of convenience, we have recently started doing online orders. In our house, we eat all types of meat, so chicken, steak, pork, whatever you got, we're eating it. Our biggest challenge, especially since COVID, has definitely been finding the quality of meat that we're used to. We've seen a lot of, lower tier meat available, but we tend to like a more either locally sourced, natural meat, organic if possible, but mainly it's just finding affordable quality meat. We're always looking for more information on just different types of meat. So whether that be learning a veal recipe or, learning some new cut of meat, as long as it's a new, fun, and refreshing recipe that the whole family can enjoy, we're always looking for that.
One of the things Jeff talked about is the importance there of bringing it all together for the family, right? Because the kids want to eat something different than mom and dad. There's a lot of things that are going into those decisions that are being made. So we've had a chance to meet a couple of consumers. I'm going to introduce you to one more in just a little bit, but I hope you picked up on some of the differences that they're facing. Leslie is a consumer that has never frozen meat until March. And Jeff is dealing with a variety of different issues as they're trying to think about protein types, as he pointed out there, as well as wellness. And he's looking for affordable quality, but he's also, as mentioned, local, organic if it's available. So there's a lot of things that go into determining how they are thinking and how we can reach them. And that's part of what we do every day, is to help marry products with their true target consumers. So I want to spend a moment here just kind of bringing that to life for you. We're going to start with the millennials. The millennials are 24 to 39 years old. They're really now coming into their prime meat buying age, and they're impacted by a variety of things. This generation grew up knowing that protein was important, so they're wanting protein in their diet, but don't mistake that protein just means meat like we think it does. They'll take protein of all sorts of types. One of the problems facing this group as they're coming into their prime meat buying years is that they're also encumbered with a tremendous amount of debt. Most of these folks came out of college with significant six-figure debt from college and are working to pay that off. So we see them struggling with how to manage the household budget. They're also increasingly interested in plant and vegetable protein consumption. They typically link that to wellness. And part of that is that their desire to continue to experiment with new foods. So when we're targeting this group with products, we really want to address some of these things that are incredibly important to them, so that they know that that meat, beef fits their diet, and we want them to pick it up at the grocery store or buy it in a restaurant. If we go to the right side and we talk about the Gen Zs, remember, these folks don't have a lot of influence right now as far as purchasing power, but they are about to. And so we have to pay attention to them as we're planning marketing programs and moving into the future, because they're very adventurous eaters. They're very interactive. They're social. They want to be eating with their friends. They also influence heavily what their friends eat. And because they don't know how to cook, meal kits become very important to them. And they are very quick to replace meat with vegetable or plant-based proteins in the future. We want to grab them now to help them understand how beef fits into their diet and get them interested and loyal for the future. So as we're marketing to these two groups separately, this would be where we would focus. But if we want to market to them together, we have to find the place where they have shared attitudes. And these two groups share a couple of very important attitudes that I'm going to be talking about as we move forward. One of those is their concern for animal care practices. They're concerned about nutrition as well, and they have less money to spend right now because a lot of them are carrying a lot of debt. But that concern for nutrition, animal well practices, and the last one, their environment, is critical to how they make decisions. So we have to address those with them in order to have them be comfortable to move forward and buying our product. The good news is that they're really open to information. So that creates opportunity for them to feel like they're in a position to make responsible decisions when purchasing animal protein. And I want to say that again, because it sounds a little odd when I say that, but they're thinking about how am I responsible and how do I make a responsible decision with my dollars? And so they're really talking and thinking about that from an ethical and a safe standpoint. So that's kind of changed how we market to consumers. You know, if we go back and we think first about the boomers, for example, it was pretty simple back in the day to be responsive to the boomer generation, because they were really all about price and taste. And as they've aged, convenience has become much more important to them. But when we add millennials to the mix, we have an elevated understanding of branding and advertising and marketing. And it really all becomes about trust and truth. Millennials, millennial moms in particular, represent about 200 billion in spending power. And 86% of them say that they will pay more for a product that has full transparency. They want to know what's in the products they're buying. They want the detailed insights regarding sourcing, how it was raised, the values that went behind raising it. Basically, why you do what you do is some of the answers that they're looking for. And so millennials have caused us to have to up our marketing game to keep them interested in and purchasing our products. So with that little background on what the generations look like, we're going to dive into consumer expectations. Because today consumers are much more aware and intentional than they were 10 years ago. And really that's because access is power. The iPhone, apps, websites, social platforms have given them a wealth of information. Some of it not helpful because it's not true. And we have to fight against that. But this level of expectations in what they want to know about their meat products is going to continue, particularly in the younger generations, as they continue to have access and use that access to make purchasing decisions that impact our bottom line. So what are those 5 different consumer expectations? I call them macro trends that we and the marketing side of things really need to keep in mind as we're helping promote and market beef products. The first one I'm going to dive into here is convenience. And before I do that, I want to introduce you to our final consumer, Carrie, who is a Gen Xer, but convenience has become pretty important to her too. So let's have a listen.
Hi there, my name is Carrie. I live in the suburbs of Charlotte, so outside the city, about 15 to 20 miles. Live here with my husband and my 3 children. They are ages 10, 8, and 5. We have a very busy and complex household dynamic. I work from home full time, so I am often very, very strapped for time. So what that really means when it comes to dinner time specifically and meal time is that we often kind of do a balance of what I would say to go kind of takeout meals as well as sort of trying to meal prep and get dinner on the table in a timely fashion. My shopping patterns in terms of buying groceries were a little bit, actually a lot different than what they are today. So for most of my packaged food items, I would purchase those at Target while I was purchasing other products for the household, like household goods, toilet paper, etc. So anything like boxed cereal, fruit snacks, juice boxes, etc. would all get purchased at Target. And part of that as well was because the prices were a lot lower than the local grocery store. When it came to fresh produce and sometimes fresh meat, if you will, we would purchase a lot of those extra items at the local grocery store. So our closest, most convenient grocery store, again, because we are so time pressed, is Harris Teeter. So purchase a lot of that there. When it came to purchasing what I would consider more quality meats or bulk meats, we would purchase those at Costco because our household size is a little bit larger. So when it comes to meat buying and meat selection, we tend to fall into our old habits and buy the same cuts over and over. Since COVID, we have had quite a dramatic shift in our shopping pattern and our shopping behavior. We are trying to do the best that we can do in terms of not going into a physical store. So I have actually, again, ordered a lot via Target, but through their Shipped app. So a lot of that is just coming directly to the doorstep, which has been absolutely amazing. I'm not really sure why I didn't do it sooner, because it has really given me a lot of time back, and that time right now is always precious.
Carrie talked on the very end there about online shopping, and online shopping is one of the things that COVID has been rocket fuel to online shopping. It's not that it didn't exist before. It's not that you couldn't do, order online and pick up at Walmart, or you could have things, as she mentioned, through Target and Shipped show up at your doorstep. It's just the acceleration pace by which that's happened. As of July, 52% of consumers had purchased meat or chicken online during the pandemic. That's a huge number, because we have statistics from a report that was done in November and December of last year, and it was 14%. It's not that these same consumers weren't using some kind of online, they just weren't buying meat through it, because most people like to go into the store, they like to pick up the package, they like to look at it, they want to pick between the packages. And COVID has caused them to give up that and become much more comfortable selecting something online and letting someone else shop for it and have it arrive at home. It's for a variety of reasons. The Gen Zs and the millennials, some of them certainly the millennials have kids at home, like Carrie, didn't want to traipse them all into the grocery store, or it could be health reasons, someone that's a higher risk with COVID and needs to stay home. Certainly those are a lot of reasons that have led to this increase in online shopping. I want to just take you through a few of the numbers just to show you how significant this is for us, that consumers become comfortable buying beef without seeing it, sight unseen, right? So this is a June scorecard for online delivery and pickup. We focus on the orders there. You can see that they have grown by over 500% in the last year alone, from 16 million in August of last year to 85 million orders in a 30-day window. So tremendous use of this and tremendous growth in the number of customers using this, as well as the frequency that they use this. We have to keep this in mind because it impacts our product and how we need to provide information, because we often provide it at the case, and now we've got consumers that aren't standing in front of the case. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But before I do, I wanted to share with you here some of the results of one of our surveys with consumers. Where 32% use the online method as their primary way of purchasing meat. They say they're going to do that even when the pandemic ends. So this is a significant shift in how consumers shop for meat, and means we have to significantly shift with them in providing information in the places they'll be looking for it, because at the meat case isn't going to be the only place they do that. I'm going to shift gears myself here and talk about the next macro trend, expectation of consumers, and that's in the area of animal welfare. Now, I'd be willing to go out on a limb and say everyone that's watching is passionate about animal welfare. We have to be, because it's the core of what we do day in and day out. Consumers agree that that's that important. The thing is, they're just not sure about what we're doing, right? 43% of shoppers say animal welfare concerns impact the purchase decisions that they make. The problem is there's a lot of messages out there that are not helping them feel good about our industry. Particularly at the height of COVID and during the pandemic, there were a tremendous amount of news articles about depopulating, mainly in the hog industry. But we also saw significant impact to cattle producers as well, right? You guys know, because you were living through the market plummet. The fact that everyone was having to hold cattle longer, turn them out on pastures, do all sorts of things to weight a slot in the packing plants, and then carcass weights, which are still up compared over last year. So all of these feelings, these things that we are dealing with as an industry and are working our way through, leave question marks in consumers' minds. And so it's very important that we're transparent and show them that we're caring for animals. Because really what we want them to see are pictures like this, right? We want them to feel good about what we're doing because we know what we're doing and we know how we're taking care of animals. It's just that they're just a little skeptical sometimes. And we can't blame them because the one bad apple amongst us, that image gets shown time and time and time again on newscasts and on social media, and that causes a lot of these problems. 65% of consumers prefer to eat protein from animals raised in humane conditions. They're looking for the verification that this is meeting their idea of what animal welfare is. Now, I have to be careful there when I talk about that because a lot of people have their pets, their fur babies, and they think we should be treating our livestock animals the same way. It's not the story I'm talking about. That's not where we want to go. But we do need to help explain what we're doing it because in their mind, animal welfare for that consumer that's concerned about it, they value transparency and understanding why we do what we do. And you'll hear me kind of come back to that. So as consumers prefer animal welfare information, we look at where they do. And this is pre-COVID research. When we ask them, where is it important to share information? 68% believed that it was responsibility of the retailer to provide it, and 55% said it's responsibility of the meat and poultry brands to provide that information. When we looked at where they wanted to find that information, 42% said on pack, 33% said on the brand website, social media, and then we go on down the list from there. So this again was pre-COVID. We know some of that has changed based on the fact of how many people are purchasing meat online, but all of these methods are important. We just have to dial them up and provide that information so that they feel comfortable buying our product. Finally, 66% of consumers are, and actually this was a survey of beef eaters. Folks that are aware of a third-party verification claim say they're more likely to pay more for that package. So they're looking for someone in a third-party sense to put the stamp of approval on it. And that takes us back to the health side of the intersection I talked about earlier, where the health is so important right now during COVID, as well as the economic issues that we're facing. So I'm going to flip again and quickly go to the third of our conversation or macro trends that we want to focus on, and that's sustainability. Sustainability is an interesting topic because it's incredibly confusing to consumers. Over half consumers say it's important that the products they buy be produced in an environmentally stable way, but their definitions are all over the board. And so they're not sure how to value it. When we started doing our research, we started with the definition you're seeing on the screen here from the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and trying to help really find the balance between all three of these. Certainly as a cattle producer, you're thinking about the environment, and consumers think about that too. You're thinking about the economic side. Consumers aren't thinking about that as much as we need to in the industry. They're thinking often way more about the social side. And so finding that balance for consumers to understand where sustainability is, what it is and what it isn't, becomes very important as we move forward with consumers. By 2030, the demand for food, water, and energy will grow by over a third, up to 50% respectively. And as a result, this awareness in these areas is just going to continue to be more important. So while the definition for sustainability is really quite squishy, that's not going to work much longer. And the reason for that is the big boy has put a stake in the ground. Last month, Walmart made a very significant announcement that they want all of their beef supply that is sold at Walmart and at Sam's Club to be completely sustainable by 2025. Now, there's more to come on how they're going to define that. But if you want an igniter to change this for consumers and to change this in the industry, that match has been lit. So it's going to happen. We're going to come some kind of definition, and that's That's where we're going to go. It's going to be important for all of us to think about as we move forward. The fourth macro trend, the fourth expectation from consumers is that of transparency. Certainly one of the most important expectations, particularly for millennials and for Gen Zs. And as we look at the younger consumers, they're really a key target here is how they're ethically focusing on brands. There's a wide array of issues I've outlined here in this slide that's really important to them, and they engage with it in different ways. If you want to think about it in a different way, think about Starbucks, right? It's a 25-cent cup of coffee that they're selling for $5, and they're doing that by talking about sustainable farming practices and ethical labor practices, and that's making it more important to the consumer who's saying, I'm going to pay for that. So from that perspective, keeping in mind how we move forward here with consumers in this area is just critical for us to address their concerns. Not all consumers have the same concerns, which gives us the niches that we have to pay attention to and where we're targeting a particular product. But these concerns continue to grow over time and have grown even more in the last couple of months. The final expectation, the one that really brings all this together, is trust. What do we need to earn it? How do we earn it? From March, when most of us, the lockdown became in this country and COVID was here, through May, and just in that short time frame, our social media team saw an increase of almost 470% in conversations in the social spectrum. So we listened to conversations on Twitter, on Facebook, and Instagram, on various platforms, and we were looking for certain words. In this case, we were looking for vegetarianism and veganism, as well as meat. So we saw a really huge increase in conversations, which makes sense, because the meat industry was definitely in the crosshairs of COVID and on the nightly news on a fairly regular basis. Unfortunately, during that same time frame, the negative sentiment in those conversations and the messages also skyrocketed. It increased about 24%. So the way we communicate trust becomes critically important to overcome all of the noise that is being heard out there about why consumers shouldn't eat our product. So we have to overcome that by sharing our stories of transparency, of animal welfare, of sustainability, so that we can overcome the concerns that they are getting and that they are hearing on a fairly regular basis. Trust is now the make or break difference for us. So how do we do that? We have to be very proactive. We have to share stories. We have to up our transparency and talk specifically about why we do what we do every day. And we've got to talk directly to consumers, even if you're not selling directly to them. Later on today, Brandy Buzzard's going to talk. She's got great examples on her Instagram of how she shares her story, particularly a shared farmer, Derek here, and also mom at the meat counter, Janelle. Just 3 examples. There's a lot out there that are doing a really good job. We need more people to help share this, because this is how we overcome the issues that plague our consumers and cause them to hesitate in purchasing our products. The struggle is this. It's how do we answer all of these changing expectations from our consumers? When you look at this picture, what do you see? I see a lot of sameness. I see no effort being told to stand out or tell a story. No effort to share what's being done on animal welfare or sustainability or anything that helps lead to trust. I just see a package of meat, and that package is important, and there's been so much effort put in getting it to this point, but we're not telling the stories to help drive it on home, the message, and make sure that that package goes home with the consumer. And that's where branding comes in. So there's many different paths to lead for your animals to be worth more, but for a consumer, sharing those messages in a way that we can tell a story helps branding become a critical component of this. Branding provides a variety of benefits, just 3 of them. It allows us to tell the story. It allows us to build trust. It allows us to build loyalty. And all of those increase value. They increase what the consumer is willing to pay for our product, which means it increases what you can get for your animals. So the key here is, how are you getting more out of the animals in order to move forward? You know, if you can't tell your story, you can't get top dollar efforts. Really, we can't. We're in an economy that has moved to be that of specialist. Consider medicine for a second. The family physician, the one that knows us from wee lads all the way up, takes care of us. When they give us our shots, strep throat, everything, they don't get paid nearly as much as when you need to go to a cardiologist or to a spine surgeon, right? That's the specialized folks are the ones that command the bigger dollars. Well, that's the same way in the beef industry. If we're a generalist, we're not going to get the opportunity to have the economic benefits of all the extra work you're already putting into it. And in many ways, it's not going to help you be in a position to hand the farm over to the next generation, because you're getting bottom dollar. So tying your product to a brand, selling your product on the grid, those types of things will help you get more for it. Because we can all be specialists, and being specialized is that path forward. But we don't all have to be the same specialist, right? We can focus on one niche or another, aligning ourselves so that we can bring more of that consumer dollar back to us and keep viable our own operations, while also keeping beef on consumers' plates. And to do that, we've got to address things that the consumer values: transparency, animal welfare, sustainability, all in an effort to build trust. I have no doubt that many of you are already doing a lot of these things. You're just not talking a lot about them. So everyone needs to get a megaphone and really share. And that megaphone is social media, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference for us as we move forward with consumers. So I want to take you back to my DC summer internship as I wrap up here, because by the time the summer was over, my vegan Oakland raised roommate was no longer a vegan. And it was really all about a lot of conversations with her about the why we do what we do. And that really has helped fuel me in understanding that consumers just want to know more. It's not every consumer, but the ones that want to know more will find more. So we have to be able to put that information out there and tell our story. Because if your reason for being in the beef business is you want to hand the business on to the next generation, I'm sure your operation doesn't look the same as when you started running it. So you can't expect it to look the same when you hand it on. And so telling our story and having the narrative, so if you walk away with nothing else from the time we spent together, but to understand consumers want to know more. They have a myriad of questions, and it's important that we each use our own narrative, our own voices to tell that story. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I'll leave this up for a second if anyone wants to grab my email or phone number or Twitter handle there. But then I'll stop sharing, and Jenny, turn it over to you.
Alrighty, so thank you again, Danette, for the presentation. And now we're going to look at some questions that you all have submitted. And remember, if you want to submit a question at any time during our presentations, just click on the little chat button at the box below, and there's going to be a box that'll appear to the side of your screen, and you just type them in there. First off, Danette, the 5 macro trends that you shared with us, I wholeheartedly believe in those. It's something that I've been hearing from good folks like you for the past 10 years, that these things are coming, and we have to really focus on them. During the pandemic, what was the top one that really struck out more among our consumers in the middle of their panic or their buying decisions? It was an uncertain time. Now we have a little bit more certainty, but what is the top thing that was at the top of their mind?
So it changed as we've gone through. At the very beginning, it was about food insecurity. Consumers were walking into grocery stores, they were seeing shelves empty, and that's a freak out moment, right? So it was really a concern about the security and food safety, which really started then leading to conversations in their minds or how the animal's being taken care of. So we saw a lot of that early on. That has shifted now to be more of what I would say is about trust. So we got through the freak out moments, and now it's, can I trust that this package, that the animal was well cared for, that the environment is being cared for? Can I trust this company? And that has been a significant conversation piece among consumers as they're trying to decide what to buy now. So I think we'll continue to see that trust area build, and really all of them, Jenny, ladder up to trust. So I'm kind of cheating and answering your question, but it's really important that consumers trust us as they make decisions on what they're going to buy.
So we've got a question on here from one of our speakers for tomorrow. Who are the most trustworthy sources of expertise in the consumer's eyes? Is it still the producer, or are they starting to place their trust in other people?
Producer, hands down. They want to hear your story. You know, picking up your phone while you're out feeding cattle and shooting cattle and talking about it, and then turning this so they can see you and telling why you do it. That trust barometer is really, really strong. Then there come some areas where a veterinarian is also very strong. Kind of depends on some topics, but they want to know why you do what you do, because let's face it, people are very removed from the farm, and we talk about how many people don't have that they don't have the opportunity to go visit a farm or just talk to someone directly. So we need to be telling the story. That's how we get there.
Okay. So from one of our other attendees, there's a lot of talk about what consumers want, but what are they willing to pay more money for?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer is, it depends on the consumer. So as I was talking about how we have to be a economy of specialists, some consumers will pay more for no antibiotics. They want that, they will pay for it. That doesn't mean everybody will. Some people will pay more for a confirmation of environmental issues that are important to them. It's really like we used to have we go out and eat pizza and they cut it into 8 slices. Well, now they cut it into 24 slices, and we all have all these thin slices, and some are bigger and some are smaller. That's how the consumer looks at it. So you hear these generalities, well, the consumer won't pay for that. And that is a correct statement if we're talking about all consumers. But there are niches that absolutely will pay for it, and we see it time and time again. So aligning yourself with that niche is where you're going to have an opportunity to bring in more dollars for your animals.
Okay. So we've got another question here, and on the vegan and veganism topic, how can beef best compete with the plant proteins and the alternative meats that are coming out, and these younger generations that are looking to transition to some of those products? On a personal note, ew.
I'm right there with you, Jenny. And I'm going to be careful because I can get on my soapbox about this. But one of my favorite questions to ask, I have a sophomore in college and a senior in high school. And so when their friends are over, we're having these conversations, like when Burger King came out with the Impossible Whopper. Did you try it? Yeah. What'd you think about it? It was okay. Okay, did you just try the meat, or did you eat it covered up in everything, right? So we have that conversation. And then when I'm talking to folks that are making actual purchase decisions, I'll say, have you read the ingredient label? And that usually stops people in their tracks. It really does, because they have this idea that plant-based equals healthier than beef. But when you show them an ingredient label, I actually keep a picture of one on my phone. I show it the ingredient label, and then I say, well, here's the ingredient label for beef, and it's just beef. You can have a great conversation about, they're like, oh, this isn't what I heard. This isn't what I thought. And you can have a really nice conversation with folks. So really it comes down to this idea that health means I should be eating this stuff. But then when I see it and I can't even pronounce the ingredients, it can change some minds.
Okay. We've got another question here, and I got to say, this is the same kind of question I had in my head too. What do you think the consumer's definition of sustainability is? Because we see this word used with a lot of different companies. Everybody's got their own definition. Are we starting to solidify what that definition is?
We're not there yet. It's as varied as you can imagine, right? As the topography of this country, it's that varied. You've got folks that think about sustainability only in the mindset of greenhouse gases. You've got folks that think about it in sustainability only in the mindset of animal welfare. So you've got to look at it across everything. as I mentioned, Walmart has put a stake in the ground. We're going to get to a definition. If we try to boil that down, it's doing more with less, really. That's what sustainability is. But we have to come to a consensus. We're not there yet. We're going to end up getting there really quick.
On a side note, do you think that some of the new technologies that are coming on board, whether they're blockchain technologies or some of our new apps and traceability, do you think that's going to be able to solidify that definition because we now have the data to back it up, that we actually produced it and there was that transparency as well?
Right. So for if I talk about the slices of pizza, if there may be 3 or 4 of those slices of pizza that are really, really interested in where it comes from. Like, where does this meat come from? Who produced it? So by using blockchain and giving them the opportunity to find that out, they feel that that is more sustainable. They feel that it helps kind of make them feel better about buying it, and it's going to address that. For others, it's going to be simply the matter that we put the technology in place. They're not going to dive deep into understanding it. They don't want to. They're busy. But they want to know that we've gone to the effort to do it, and we've got the proof points for them, which will make a difference. So as more of this comes online, that's hard. In our industry of 700,000 independent cattlemen, it's hard to do that, but it's becoming more and more important to have the trace through so people can have the answers to those questions.
Okay. We've got another question here from Cami. With a growing share of our products going to export markets, do consumers outside of America mirror the trends here? And I gotta say, that was another question I had, because we have so much of our meat going outside of the country.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because a lot of Europe is ahead of us in this. So they don't want a lot of our meat, right? They've even had rules to keep us out for many, many years because of that. So in some ways, part of the world is ahead of us in these trends. In other areas, it's dependent on what we're sending. You know, right now we're at a time where we're sending a lot of middles and high-end premium product, and a lot of stuff we don't like to eat here that goes into countries where they need to feed people. So it's really, I can't answer it as in a full-scale exports, because you have to kind of look at the country and what's important to them and the attributes that are important to them. But I would say the U.S. really kind of falls middle of the pack on this right now, as far as where these trends are impacting when you're looking at the U.K. or even Australia, or some of the things are starting to emerge in China.
Okay. You know, one last one real quick. By the way, folks, if you've got questions, be sure to click on the chat button and add them to the box over here below. And we had one come in. So we saw that we have a lot more people that are ordering online and getting that delivered or doing the pickup. I'm one of them. And once they made it easy for me, I don't think I'll ever go back. But that also takes away that browsing and figuring out, oh, that's on sale, and I'm at the meat case and I can figure out what I'm going to do there. That also changes how we are going to start marketing and making those educational touch points with our consumers in the next 10 years. Where do we go? It's not just standing out and handing recipes and samples, right? So where are our opportunities there?
Yeah, so that's where information online becomes critically important. And we're seeing it start to happen, but COVID has slowed a lot of this down. So it used to be if you bought something online, you just kind of had a front picture of the package and that was it, right? So now you're starting to see Walmart's added nutritional information, and you're starting to see sometimes there's a video that will talk about how something was raised. So we've got to get more information online right there where you click to put it in the cart. So that's one place we have to make that happen, but that can't be the only place. We've got to do that through our own. I keep going back to the social channels, and I know that there's cattlemen on here going, I'm so busy, I cannot take this on. I beg you to take it on, even if you don't post a lot, or find a high schooler or a 4-H or an FFA person to help you out on occasion to tell the story, because those are the connections that people are wanting. And that you can say that this truckload of cattle went to this place and that's going to help feed folks. That's really important. It's really important that we share that information. So we've got to bring all that together, because we can't accomplish it all at the meat case anymore.
And like she said, folks, Brandy Buzzard will be on at 6 o'clock this afternoon at this very same link. And Brandy is going to talk to us about how we can general, or we can be the generals in our own tent and marshal our resources and get out there and do more. We got time for one more question. Danette, are you seeing any interest in new groups looking to get into the packing industry on a moderate size because of what happened at the top part of the pandemic?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of interest in that happening. There's been some grants put aside for studying it in more of a regional effort. And that could bring some really unique opportunities across the country. So we are seeing interest bubbling in those areas for sure.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you so very much, Danette, for pivoting, which must be the word for 2020. I tell you what, there's a lot of new vocabulary in all of our hearts right now. Unprecedented and pivoted are two such words. Folks, if we didn't get to your questions today, remember we'll have Danette's contact information available, and you can reach out to her online. And we want to thank Danette again for coming on and joining us today. And before we move on to our next speaker, who will be Brian Bertelson with US Premium Beef, we want to take a brief moment to recognize some of our sponsors for today's session.
From the ranch to the backgrounder to finishing, Port Supply Technologies has a solution to help you improve profit through better data management. Our autonomous solutions for health monitoring, inventory verification, and movement tracking collect data without having to restrain animals just to read their IDs. Port Supply Technologies is ready to help your operation today.
We all know that beef tastes great, but did you know that it's good for you too? A 3-ounce portion of lean beef provides 10 essential nutrients for around 150 calories with less than 10 grams of total fat.
The Kansas Beef Council focuses on increasing beef demand through research, education, and promotion. For example, we hosted health influencers from across the country to learn about beef nutrition research. Visit a working ranch and sit down with members of the beef industry to learn the truth about how beef is raised. Exit surveys showed participants had a higher perception of beef as a result of this checkoff-funded program. We also share nutrition information online and in the news because beef is nutritious and delicious. We've developed relationships with culinary influencers across Kansas and Kansas City and created a new series called Recipes from the Heartland to inspire consumers to reach for beef to bring back memories of home. The series has reached nearly 1 million consumers, and recipe videos produced by the Kansas Beef Council have reached tens of millions of consumers.
What would you say, Jill, is our biggest challenge?
In our marriage?
Yeah, start there.
Alarm clocks.
And when people were stuck at home during the pandemic, Kansas ranchers opened up their homes to consumers across the state with virtual tours produced by the Beef Council to show a first-hand glimpse into how beef is raised from pasture to plate.
My name is Shay. I've been ranching for 4 years. I'm pretty much a pro right now.
And sometimes the smallest of ranchers can be the best of teachers. And the future of our industry showed consumers what it's like to grow up on a ranch. and how Kansas beef producers care for their cattle and their land. That beef and families go hand in hand.
Beef is raised by families just like mine.
I know these cattle, they're here, they're healthy, and they're comfortable because somebody on this staff has individually checked them every single day and sometimes twice a day, 365 days a year.
Because the story of beef starts with you and your operation. So we've been hitting the road to tell consumers about the great work you're doing, feeding your neighbors, your state, and your world. For more information, visit kansasbeef.org, which has generated over 1 million page views to consumers.
Well, again, thanks to all of our sponsors and thanks to the Kansas Beef Council for sponsoring this session today for our virtual Cattle U. You can also read more about their products, all of their services, in the digital program that will be emailed to all of the registrants, even if you registered today and got online. Well, now let's bring to the screens Brian Bertelson, who will talk with us about adding value to the cattle that you produce. Brian is Vice President of Field Operations for U.S. Premium Beef, a producer-owned beef processing company that is an owner of National Beef Packing Company, the nation's 4th largest beef processor. Brian provides technical services and education to producers regarding genetics, management, nutrition, and carcass data of the cattle that they deliver to further develop their beef production system. Brian holds degrees in animal science and ruminant nutrition from the University of Illinois. And previously, he worked as a cattle nutritionist in the feed industry and as a beef specialist with Cooperative Extension. We heard from Danette earlier about trends in under the COVID bubble, as it were. Is there anything that you see from the folks that you're supplying that they're coming back to you and saying, we have this new market of these people that want things in a different packaging, or they want a different size ribeye, or they want this or they want that? What are some of those trends that people are coming back to you at U.S. Premium Beef, or you talk with others in your industry that we can start making our decisions for in the next couple of years or so?
Well, that's a good question. I'll say this though, U.S. Premium Beef as a company, we don't market the beef, National Beef does. And, I interact with some of those people. I've been able to go on some tours at ranches and feedlots with National Beef people and customers from around the world. And that's really exciting. I've learned a lot. And they're trying to figure out, how do we do this? And it's sometimes a little bit frustrating that some of these companies that buy really large volumes, so it's actually a little difficult for them to only buy from one processor because they need such a big volume. For example, one processor could say, hey, we could group these cattle that have these attributes and harvest them and sell product from them to you. And they might say, well, that's great, but in the back of their minds, they're remembering, oh, that means I've got to buy all my product from Packer X. And so it can be a little bit challenging to back up and just echo what Danette said. National Beef has a retail company, Kansas City Steaks, and obviously during COVID, when meat cases were empty, sales really increased there as well. And that's the same thing you were just talking about, internet sales. Of course, the thing there is that probably about 99 to 95% of what we sell is just beef. We're not selling all groceries, just beef. So it's kind of like the online butcher, but we're hoping that after that introduction to a lot of new customers, that they may say, oh, this is a pretty good way to buy beef, and we'll keep doing it.
Okay. Let's see. Remember, folks, go ahead and ask those questions over in the chat box. We're coming up at the top of the hour here, so I won't keep you too much longer. So what I'm hearing from you and what I'm hearing from everybody else is, if I want to really set myself apart as far as, being differentiating my cattle from other cattle, I really have to have a plan in place. I can't just, scattergun this and see if any of the bird shots get a hit. You really have to know where your market's going to be, and then you have to make your decisions towards that, right? Is that one of the pitfalls that you see people falling into?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, there was a lot of things that were listed on my lists. And like I said, there is a lot more that I didn't list just because of time and space. And so, again, talk with your customers. You may say, well, I sell at a sale barn, I don't really know who's buying my cattle. Well, there's order buyers there. They're the ones that are bidding on contract basis for feedlots. Talk to those people. If you're a nutritionist or veterinarian, also works with feeders, talk to them. If you're interested, I'll say this, I'll put in a plug. If you're looking to sell cattle, find out how they do. Just sell them as feeders, but find out how they do. We have a list on our website, uspremiumbeef.com, and there's a list of qualified custom feed yards. So they are feed yards that own part of our company. They are marketing a good share of their cattle on our value-based grid. And when I asked them as a whole, hey, are you guys willing to share information back with ranchers that supply you with cattle? Yes, unequivocally, yes, they're interested in doing that. So I'll put that shameless plug in there, that those are people that you can call, because let's face it, you may not know how good your cattle really are. We all think we have good cattle, but that's a way to find out how good they really are, and then move forward from there and talk about what things we can do to add value. So yeah, that's more of shooting with a scope rather than the shotgun approach.
Spray and pray. All righty. Well, hey, thank you, Brian. We are getting around here to coming out of time. We want to thank all of you all for joining us here today over your noon 2-hour break. Thanks to our sessions speakers for their insights into how we can capitalize on our market trends. Thank you to our session sponsor, Kansas Beef Council. You can join us right here at this exact same link tonight at 6 p.m. when we will be joined by 2019 NCBA Beef Advocate of the Year, Brandy Buzzard. She's going to present one of our keynote speeches for the day, and she'll offer insights into how we can communicate for our industry and really target our message for sustainable beef. And that session, again, begins right here at this very same link at 6 p.m. So grab some supper and join us for some learning. Now, if you like this format, or if there's something different that we can do, please let us know. All registered attendees will receive a survey in their email boxes. Like you, if you're familiar with all of our HPJU events, we take all of the feedback that you give us very seriously in creating next year's event. So as you might imagine, we're reinventing our programming right now so that we can make sure that we use your feedback to make sure that we craft session topics and times that help you. So thank you very much for helping us make a better experience for everybody in the future. On behalf of all of us here at High Plains Journal, thank you for riding with us, and we will see you right here at this very same link at 6 p.m. for our next session of High Plains Journal's Virtual Cattle U.
Dirt road in a gooseneck, saddle up with me. Dry land in God's country, crops far as I can see.